right, a very good evening. Would like to be able to welcome you to another of our Health and its Preservation with Dr. John Clark. We have been blessed by Dr. Clark's ministry. Had taken a little bit of a break, hopefully, to be able to recuperate and do what the Lord has called us to be able to do. But we are glad to be back and now to be able to present and bring to your knowledge uh, the conditions of the human body. In specific, we're dealing with the stroke today. Would love to be able to have you contact us if you have any questions, to be able to drop it in the chat or wait until the end of the meeting to be able to get your questions answered. But Dr. Clark, it's always good to be able to see you, and it's wonderful that we can be able to network in such a manner as this. But before we begin, I'm going to ask Dr. Clark if you can begin our session today with a word of prayer, and we can get started, sir.
Okay, very good. And then you want me to go straight into the presentation, or?
Sir, you're good to go.
Okay, very good. Let's bow our heads for a word of prayer. Dear Father in heaven, it's good to be able to gather here online to think about health and its preservation. Lord, we've had a lot of people get sick over the years, and we know it's much of it's very preventable. Lord, as we share on the topic of stroke or cerebral vascular accident, today we pray that it'll be understandable, that it'll be a blessing, that people understand what they do and don't do that affects the risk of this disease, and what they can do to help if they think they might be having a stroke. So Lord, bless us to that end, and we're thankful for our listeners. In Jesus' name, amen. I'm going to turn on my screen share at this point and start up my PowerPoint. And so we'll just turn that on here. And so we have our world slide there. So, stroke, the brain accident you want to avoid. We call it cerebral vascular accident in the hospital, or CVA. Most people think of it as stroke. So, don't let this happen to you. Mary Ann was a very loved employee of a big corporation. She worked there for nearly 40 years of her life. She was ready for retirement. Everybody wanted to send her off with a wonderful party. And you know, at parties, we always have to have food. And it's not the best food. It's not the most healthy food. Oh, yes, white bread type cake with frosting that's largely very full of oil and sugar. And all kinds of rich foods and gifts and things to drink. And, well, you know, this is her retirement party. You only get one of these, at least most people, in their lifetime. And so she ate all this stuff that she wasn't normally used to eating. And she woke up the next morning unable to smile with half of her face, had to be taken care of by others her entire retirement. What happened? Why would this happen? What was the initiating event? What set her up for this? How can I make sure I avoid this? I mean, everybody wants a retirement party, right? Well, but maybe not with foods that will blow your mind, huh? Yeah. Well, let's just think about why this would have happened. First of all, let's look at the nature of the blood vessels in the brain and in the heart. If we look at the heart, we see here a diagram on the left of a heart, and there's a big red blood vessel coming out of the top of the heart. That's the aorta. That's the blood vessel that takes blood to most of the body. But then there's little blood vessels coming off the side of that, at least relatively little compared to that aorta. They're actually pretty large, and that is the left main coronary artery and the right main coronary artery. The left one is actually on the right side of the picture. And if you look at that artery, it covers a large portion of the heart muscle. It's a very important artery in that respect. If you look to the right of that diagram, you see a black and white picture of an angiogram taken of those blood vessels. Notice that one of them is nearly completely blocked. It narrows down to almost nothing. This person probably has pain or numbness in the jaw or arm or chest when they exert themselves, maybe even if they get excited and do things that make their heart pump faster. Now, an angiogram is a very invasive way to have to test this. I mean, this is sticking a needle in usually your groin and putting a big tube all the way up to your heart, spraying in dangerous dyes, and we don't do this to everybody. How would we know who to do this to? Well, we only know to do this to somebody if they're symptomatic. Well, when do they become symptomatic? Only after they have blocked 70% of that artery. In other words, you don't know. You could be blocked 68% and never know it and never go for an angiogram. And you know, the first time you have symptoms, it could be your last. But it does mean we have a large amount of reserve. I mean, we can block it 70% and only be starting to get its symptoms. So we have lots of, you know, room for, you know, for error there, I guess, or for blockage. Well, that's the heart. That's the heart. So the heart has a, you know, what would we say? A nice buffer zone, 70%. But if we get to the brain, notice that there's one artery that feeds the frontal lobes of your brain. One artery called the anterior cerebral artery. One artery that makes a difference whether those frontal lobes function or not. You see, your frontal lobes are where your conscience is, where you distinguish right from wrong. It's where you do your higher thinking. It's what distinguishes you from, say, a monkey. It's a distinction you want to maintain. And but here's the thing. If this artery gets blocked just 20%, 20%, not 70%, 20%, we can detect mental function changes on a mini mental status exam. I mean, we just ask you questions and the answers don't come out right. This is the result of plaque in the brain. Interesting, huh? Well, we're going to talk about caffeine effect here in a little bit too. Caffeine will shut down the blood flow to your frontal lobes by 30%, not 20%, 30%. And people who drink caffeine are much more likely to share information they otherwise would have kept confidential. It shuts down your ability to be inhibited. I mean, to distinguish right from wrong, to decide what's good and what's bad, whether you should share that information or not. And so this is a very important fact to know. I mean, if your neighbor's not talking, take him down to Starbucks, give him the big one, the latte, and he becomes a monkey. So I'm assuming that Marianne already had quite a bit of blockage in her brain before she went to that retirement party. You know, be a little bit of a investigator here with me, right? Sherlock Holmes type thing. Yeah, okay. So we can just figure, and a retirement age lady, she probably has plaque in her heart and plaque in her brain. Probably more symptomatic in the brain than in the heart. So then, what would have been the effect of a retirement party type menu plan for the evening? Well, rich brain foods, rich foods in the brain. Here it is. What happens to brain function when you eat rich foods? Here I have oxygen on the brain up the left-hand side of this graph. Across the bottom, we have hours and days after eating such a meal. Now, let's just eat a high-fat retirement party meal at time 0 there. See 0 across the bottom? There's 0, 6 hours, 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. Okay, at time 0, we're going... Oh, look what happens. Within 6 hours, the oxygen on the brain falls below 70%. What's more, it doesn't return to normal for 1, 2, 3 whole days. And so if she already had blockage in her brain from plaque, and now she eats some retirement party cake or whatever, high in fat and sugar, then all the blood cells go relowing, sticking together in clumps, and the oxygen on the brain falls, but she's already low on oxygen due to some plaque in the brain. The two together shut the blood off And we call that an ischemic, or blood-free, bloodless, a lack of blood, stroke, ischemic stroke, loss of blood flow to the brain. And so there you go, and especially oxygen flow to the brain. All because we wanted a retirement party. All because we let down our guard and said, we'll just do it once. Does that tell you something about just doing it once? Oh yeah, I mean, it could have been a heart attack. It could have been a brain attack. It could have been, yeah, kidney attack. There's other organs that are also, very dependent on their blood flow. And an episode like this of already having plaque, and then eating the foods that drop the oxygen in the bloodstream, and you're in trouble. You're in big trouble. So when it comes to stroke, we need to be fast. This acronym can quickly help recognize the signs of stroke. B, balance, loss of balance. E, eyes, person has changes in their vision. F, face, can't smile on one side. Arms, maybe one arm doesn't work or is weaker. Speech, slurred speech, can't think of words, confused. And then time to call for help. Well, we'll tell you what to do for help at home here in a little bit. So let's just talk about this balance. Sudden loss of balance and coordination, tripping around, stumbling, trouble walking, wobbling around, dizziness. Then the eyes, sudden blurred vision or double vision or sudden loss of vision, maybe half of your vision lost. Face, you ask the person to smile, are both sides of the face smiling or is one side drooping? Sudden severe headache, and seen with pain on the face, right? Numbness and tingling in the face. Then there's the arms. Ask the person to raise both arms. Does one side drift downward or not stay up or not make it all the way up? A numbness, tingling, weakness on one side. And then there's speech. Slurred or garbled speech. Can he or she repeat simple phrases? Repeat after me. Or ask them things they should know. What's your name? What's your address? What's your phone number? Unable to comprehend. Asks to have you repeat it because they didn't comprehend it, not because they didn't hear. Time. You want to note when the symptoms begin. Call stroke code immediately if you're in the hospital. Okay, so what is a stroke? Well, a stroke occurs when blood vessels that carry oxygen and nutrients to the brain are either blocked by a clot or they burst and bleed. When that happens, part of the brain cannot get the blood or oxygen it needs, and it starts to die. It starts to die. And so it's really a brain attack. And once it starts, in a few minutes, you could lose a couple million cells. In fact, every few minutes, you lose a couple million cells. And the consequence of a stroke can be long-term disability or even death. So there's 2 or 3 different types of stroke. One is ischemic. It's the largest proportion of the strokes are ischemic. So we'll focus a lot on that with some of our recommendations. And then 10% are intracranial or intercerebral hemorrhages. The intracranial ones are subarachnoid. The intercerebral means inside the brain. So either on the surface of the brain or inside the brain, you get these bleeds. And the brain does not like blood floating around that doesn't belong there. And it irritates the cells and causes brain dysfunction. So if we look at the ischemic strokes, here's an artist diagram. And you can see here that the artery already had some plaque in it. And then along came a blood clot. And, retirement food will also increase the likelihood of having a blood clot. And so blockage in an artery in the brain caused by a blood clot results in brain death in that area. And then whatever that part of the brain was supposed to do, whether it's hearing or touch or taste or movement, whatever, it's not going to work anymore. And so you see these findings. Then the bleed, representing 10 to 13%, either from an aneurysm or from a blood vessel bursting, causes blood to go into an area of the brain The brain swells. That cuts off more blood. It's almost like an ischemic stroke. In fact, the mechanism is somewhat ischemic. As the blood goes into that area and inflammation builds, edema comes in, blood flow stops, brain cells die, and you end up with this problem. A little bit of the difference is that with a bleed, you're less likely to want to anticoagulate them to fix the problem than with a ischemic stroke. So let's just look at the numbers. Strokes occur in approximately 750,000 individuals each year. 65% of stroke survivors have some degree of lasting impairment. It's the third leading cause of death in the United States. And so by 2030, we figure that there'll be a 20% increase in strokes. And that's not good. And in 2018 and 19, the direct and indirect cost of stroke in the United States was $56 billion. Now I gave you those numbers. What is that? What do those numbers tell you? Or what do those dates, when you think about those? COVID-19, right? This is before COVID-19. We got to talk about the effect of COVID-19 too on this risk of stroke. Now, some people talk about not just a stroke, but a TIA, transient ischemic attack. Oh, I had a mini stroke. Oh, they call it mini stroke. It's a stroke that only lasts a few minutes or a very short time. And we might call it a warning stroke as well. It's often followed, it can be followed by a full stroke. And you do want to, do something about it. And the symptoms are similar to a stroke. Numbness of the face, hand, leg, with or without weakness, paralysis, slurred speech, dizziness, double vision, hemopia. That means you can only see half of a field. It might be the two outer halves are missing, or two inner halves are missing, or both one half. I mean, it can be any of these. Transient monocular blindness, in one eye won't see. Imbalance in how much you see out of each eye. Aphasia. This is like I can't speak. Confusion and head pain, headache. Now, signs and symptoms of a stroke or TIA are similar. And so we'll just kind of go over those again here. Sudden weakness or numbness, loss of strength, especially the face, arm, leg, but it's temporary for the TIA. Trouble speaking that's temporary, or understanding, confusion, vision problems that are sudden, but usually, for a TIA, just a short period of time. Headaches, usually very severe, dizziness, loss of balance. And so approximately 240,000 people experience a TIA each year. So about a third of what experience strokes. 12% of ischemic strokes are preceded by a TIA. So you had a warning. And the risk of sustaining a stroke following a TIA increases with time, at least in the first 3 months. What are the risk factors for a stroke? This is back to stroke now, setting aside TIA. What are the risk factors? Well, big one is a high blood pressure. Why do we have high blood pressure? Now, we've given a talk on here, a couple different talks on high blood pressure. But usually high blood pressure is there because some part of the body is low in oxygen and is calling for more oxygen. And so the blood vessels tighten up and the heart rate increases. So you're already in an oxygen deficit. You need more oxygen. You're low on oxygen. That's why your blood pressure goes up. That's a big reason. And another one that's very big for strokes is diabetes. Diabetics have a lot more strokes. It kills more, people with diabetes than ones that don't. Tobacco and smoking, probably due to the blood pressure, but it also inflames the blood vessels. Heart disease. And if there's disease in the heart, cardiovascular disease we call it, there's going to be disease throughout all the blood vessels, and a lot of blood vessels go to the brain, and so you have brain disease through the blood vessels. Alcohol creates high blood pressure, poisons the brain, higher stroke rate. Oral contraceptives. I've treated a number of ladies who were on oral contraceptives and resulted in stroke. Sedentary lifestyle, sitting around too much, too many stiff blood vessels, blood pressure goes up, the blood vessels are not supple. High-fat diet, and this is a big one. That's, you know, the retirement diet, right, that I talked about there. High cholesterol, that goes along with the high-fat diet, from, you remember from our cholesterol talk. Obesity, well, that goes along with high-fat diet too, but anyway, being overweight usually has high blood pressure with it too. And so these are all increased risks for stroke. And then stress. Yeah, we'll get back to stress. Another thing that does it is, you know, not just tobacco smoking, but marijuana use. Young adults with recent marijuana use showed an 80% higher risk of stroke. 80%. Frequent users showed 145% higher risk of stroke. This is, but they've been legalizing it. Wow. What do you suppose the stroke drug people, you know, the people who sell pharmaceuticals for strokes have been behind that? Who knows? You know, there's medicine these days doesn't mind more business, and who knows what the, you know, kickback is to lawmakers. But marijuana, I mean, we did a whole talk on here on marijuana. Remember all the stuff we talked about marijuana and the effect on people's long-term success in life and risk of schizophrenia, and well, now we got a higher risk of stroke. Now, what about having had a vaccine for COVID-19? Risk of stroke goes up by, well, 90%. Yeah, or over 90%. You see here, COVID-19 vaccine, 5,000 strokes. Influenza vaccine, over 408 months, 52 strokes. Other vaccines, over 408 months, which would be about 8 years, 282. So, I mean, it's just ridiculous. And, I mean, this makes you scratch your head, right? Yeah. Anyway, risk for stroke. We'll talk about what to do about this, though. You know, and if you took one of those vaccines, you better be taking note and looking at how to prevent a stroke. And we'll be getting into that here. Mostly, we'll start here with all the foods and so forth, but then we'll get into prevention and treatment of a stroke. Stroke risk increases with degree of carotid stenosis. So you have these arteries in your neck that feed your brain. In this picture here, we have to the left a computer-generated model of a man with his heart and the blood vessels going up to his brain. You see him there in the front. You see him going up to the head. That's the carotid arteries. If those get blocked, then your risk of stroke goes up dramatically, and especially small vessel disease in the brain, leading to stroke or aneurysms or bleed. And so here we have a picture on the right of an angiogram of a carotid artery, and with a narrowing and a loss of blood flow to the brain through that particular artery. So scan people for carotid artery stenosis, and we tell them intima thickness and all this kind of stuff. It's all in an effort to stave off a stroke. And how do we fix it for them? Well, I say we, the medical system. How does the medical system fix it? Well, carotid artery endarterectomy. Oh, yeah, I've seen people stroke out on the operating table in the midst of one of those operations. They give them pills. They give them drugs that are like Drano in their bloodstream, urokinase, that kind of thing. Try to clean it up. I mean, but how about going with a natural approach? Well, we'll get to that. So let's talk about blood pressure. Lowering systolic blood pressure by 5 points in the United States, nationwide, would reduce the number of deaths from stroke by 23,000 per year. Yes, the blood pressure has something to do with it. So if we could just lower everybody's blood pressure. How do you lower everybody's blood pressure? Hand out pills? No, that's not the solution. The solution is to improve the oxygen carrying capacity of the blood and the flowing capacity or flowing ability of the blood. So it gets around to all the blood vessels better and allows the blood to go where it needs to go with its oxygen. And then the blood pressure comes down. Imagine that. Well, yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about this, but really you have to go back to our blood pressure talk to really get into the details of lowering blood pressure with diet and lifestyle. All right, cholesterol. And we said a high cholesterol increases your risk of stroke, so we're going to go in through these individually now. And cholesterol significantly increases the stroke as you get older. The older you get, the higher the risk at a steady high cholesterol. On the other hand, high HDL, the good, what we call good cholesterol, is associated with decreased risk of especially ischemic stroke. You see, HDL helps keep the arteries clean. Triglycerides. Now, I think there's some confusion amongst people about triglycerides. They put it in a whole different category than cholesterol. But guess what? The laboratory's usual measuring technique is to put a third of triglycerides in with HDL and LDL to produce a number they call total cholesterol. So it's in there. It's, a high total cholesterol is a high triglycerides. But we do measure triglycerides separately, and triglycerides over 200 increase the risk of stroke by about 50%. What's the biggest cause of high triglycerides? Sugar. Yeah, anything that, see, your body can't store sugar as sugar cubes. It would be dangerous. It'd be like gout, right? Crystals. You can't do that. So it has to make it into something it stores. It only stores fat. So it makes your sugar, excess sugar, into triglycerides. Your triglycerides go up. And the triglycerides, go into cells as fat. It is fat. What's the most common form of triglycerides? If you're just looking for triglycerides in the supermarket, you go to the oil aisle. All those oils are triglycerides. And then they talk about what the 3 fatty acids are hooked up to the glycerin backbone. The fatty acids, glycerides, glycerin. So it's glycerin with 3 fatty acids, and so, corn oil has, some mono and polyunsaturated triglyceride or fatty acids hooks to its glycerin backbone. Coconut oil, more saturated ones. Lard, more saturated ones. Anyway, so, full side note there. Avoid high triglycerides. Tobacco doubles your risk of stroke. Salt, dietary salt increases the risk of death from stroke. So men on a high salt diet are especially apt to die from stroke. They're also more likely to be dehydrated. A national statistic, the more neighborhood fast food restaurants in a city, they can predict the higher stroke rate. It's so exact they can go and count, okay? Let's go to the city. Okay, there's 12 fast food restaurants. Go to the calculator, punch in the numbers, outcomes. You'll see X number of strokes in your city, and they're accurate. They're accurate. That's scary. And it's also like the smoking gun. But, let's not get into the politics of fast food and, Okay, so if we could reduce the sodium intake in America down to 1,300 milligrams, which is actually not low. 350 milligrams would be, more accurate to hit a happy medium. But anyway, if I could reduce it down to 1,300 milligrams, from what? From about 4 times that. Oh, okay. Per day, it would reduce the yearly death rate in America by 150,000 people. 150,000 lives saved if reduced sodium intake to 1,300 per person per day. Wow. There's other forms of sodium. One's called monosodium glutamate. The higher your blood glutamate level when you show up at the hospital with a stroke, the higher you're going to have problems. The more likely you are to have a stroke, for one thing, but the more likely to have problems. Now let's go on to diet things that are more, common and recognized, at least more thought of. Consumption of a meat diet to more than 4 times weekly is associated with increased risk of all strokes and for first ever strokes. In other words, you're not really seen to be a high risk, but you're eating all that meat, and so you have a stroke even though you have other risk points that aren't so high. Sugar and refined carbohydrates. Here I've pictured white rice. Stroke increases proportionately as a diet high in sugar and refined carbohydrates elevates your blood hemoglobin A1C. If you have a high hemoglobin A1C, your risk of stroke is high. And that can be from all the refined carbohydrates. You may not be eating products that have pure sugar in them. But if you're eating all these white flour products, for example, refined processed food products, you're going to have a stroke. And it's going to be by the same mechanism as eating sugar, even though you're not eating sugar, because it glycates your hemoglobin. It makes your blood cells coated with sugar. When they're coated with sugar, they don't carry oxygen so well. When they're coated with sugar, they carry inflammation through your body, like advanced glycation end products. And you end up with a higher risk of stroke. And so you want to choose whole grains, what we call brown bread over white bread. And that'll reduce your risk of stroke by 47%. That's right. You start eating whole grain products, you get healthier. Now, I mentioned caffeine earlier and how it shuts down the blood flow to your brain. And when people eat, drink or eat caffeine, it increases the risk of an ischemic stroke, poor blood flow to the brain. Because, like we said, you drink a cup of coffee and it shuts down the blood flow to your frontal lobes by 30%. Well, go figure. That's like that retirement party meal we talked about to start with, right? Yes. So one of the things now that we can do to help a stroke is drink more water. Dehydrated patients, if they come to the hospital and their hematocrit's high or their urine's thick or whatever, their risk of dying goes way up from the stroke. Water's your friend. Your brain is supposed to have a lot of water. People who are dehydrated have shrunken brains. Therefore, they have shrunken blood vessels in the brain. Therefore, they're more likely for an ischemic stroke. Things that help keep the blood flowing to the brain are regular physical activity, regular outdoor activity, regular activity that gets your heart pumping. We call it cardiovascular workout. This is very good. And so physical activity on every day would be good. And all right, so that's a good thing. Exercise keeps a healthy person. Now let's get back to food here for a bit. Fruit and vegetable intake and risk of stroke. You got to look at this carefully because I have white is ischemic stroke. Why white? That means the blood didn't go there. The brain got awfully white and pale because no blood went there. Red is hemorrhagic stroke. That meant it bled into the brain. Now notice we have two columns here. On the first one, it says servings of fruit and vegetables 0 to 2 per day. Very high risk of ischemic stroke. Not quite so high risk of hemorrhagic stroke, but much higher than if they ate more. Well, what if we ate 8 servings of fruits and vegetables per day? Then the risk of ischemic stroke is cut in more than half, and the risk of hemorrhagic stroke is cut down to less than a third. And so eating fruits and vegetables. And I'll talk about this more when we talk about thinning the blood for dealing with aftermath of a stroke or dealing with the COVID vaccine and its risk of stroke. But just keep in mind, the more fresh fruits and vegetables you eat, in fact, this doesn't even say fresh, does it? This study was just on fruits and vegetables. But I'm saying fresh is probably better. But anyway, more fruits and vegetables you take in, the lower your risk of stroke. So what should you be eating? Unless, of course, you're tired of life and just want to, bomb out on life. A stroke isn't a great way to die. You might just end up crawling around with half your body. This would be like, you go out to the ocean and you throw a rock at a crab and you knock out his left-hand side and he just keeps crawling with his right-hand side. Well, that's not good. No, it's not good. That's cruelty to animals. Well, eating other things than fruits and vegetables is cruelty to people, right? Well, half their body may not work after a while. So eating more fresh fruits and vegetables, that's good. Now, you don't want to overeat, even in fresh fruits and vegetables, but most people don't overeat in fresh fruits and vegetables. They overeat in things like hamburgers. Overeating is a danger. On the other hand, caloric restriction can protect neurons against degeneration, especially in models of Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and Huntington disease, and stroke. So eating less food. Eat less food, drink more water. I mean, people in Western countries with all the availability of food, the cheapness of food, eat way too much. And if that starts to bother you and you're thinking about that, well, let's address stress. Stroke and stress. There's significant psychological stress in some people, and it increases the risk of stroke by 2 to 3 times. Not percent, times. 2 to 3 times. 2 to 3 times. Yep, that's 2 to 3 times the risk of stroke. Okay. Well, what do I do about stress? Well, we did a couple talks on here about stress, but a little stress every now and then is not something to be concerned about. But ongoing, chronic stress, it can make a lot more problems for the cardiovascular system. Higher blood pressure, more heart disease, abnormal heart rhythms, heart attacks, and strokes. So there you go. Now I have the lady sitting in front of the computer. I didn't really touch on so far on the effect of EMF on risk of stroke, but EMF causes rouleau in the brain too. EMF makes all the red blood cells stick together. EMF can make it so your brain doesn't function as well. And people have done this. They've tested their blood, then they went into a high EMF area and then tested their blood again, and they had all kinds of rouleau after being with the high EMF. So EMF would be part of the stroke picture. Now, here's an interesting study. I like to throw these in. There's a group down in Texas that likes to study these kind of things, religion and different diseases. And here we're going to talk about religion and stroke. Weekly attendees at religious services were 65% less likely to experience a stroke. Wow. We've also said, if you remember, in our blood pressure talk or in our health and spirituality talk, that regular attendance at religious services lowered your blood pressure. Now, home treatments. Let's talk about what to do. If you knew you were having a stroke or a TIA, what do I do? It's 2 hours to the hospital. I'm sitting at home. How can I deal? How can I up my chances of survival? How can I lower my chances of long-term disability? What can I do? Well, first of all, drink 2 glasses of lemon water with potassium. You want to get these things on hand. Potassium 4 milligrams, zinc 40 milligrams, and magnesium 400 milligrams. 4, 40, and 400. Got that? Yeah, potassium 4, zinc 40, magnesium 400. And these are things that help relax blood vessels, help with blood pressure. Then 1 glass of water every 10 minutes for the first hour. You are flooding yourself. And then do a hot foot bath with mustard and cayenne in the water. Mustard and cayenne in the water. So mustard, you just buy this. These are seasonings. And the lady here is about to put her foot into a bowl of water. I would suggest a 5-gallon bucket. But anyway, put your foot in. So you're doing a hot foot bath. Usually a hot foot bath is done, and we demonstrate this on our website in a video called Pandemic Treatments. But anyway, you put your feet into a hot water bucket, and you put a cold cloth around your head. Now, for the stroke thing, we're saying add cayenne and mustard. The cayenne is there for blood flow, and the mustard is there for warming you up. And the hot at the foot is to carry blood to kind of decompress, congest blood out of the head down toward the feet. A cold wrap on the head is to reduce oxygen demands for the brain, to reduce excess blood flow up there, to decrease congestion. It moves the blood away from the head down toward the feet. And so this is what you want to do. If you had somebody stroking, if you had all these things on hand, I mean, you can definitely do the water in the hot foot bath. even if you had none of those other things. But if you had those other things on hand, those are helpful, very helpful. All right. What about stroke recovery? Well, we did a whole talk on this. My wife gave it. We did this back 2022, I think. And so it's called neuroplasticity, the brain that is changing itself. But it's all about recovery of stroke. How to recover if you have a stroke. What do you do if only half your body's working? What do you do if you've lost ability to think and plan? And we cited a person who had that half their body was totally wiped out. What it is it's reprogramming your brain to use other brain tissue that's not being used for anything else to do the things that have been lost due to the stroke, to the ischemic or hemorrhagic stroke. And so you want to go back and review that video on this YouTube channel and just see what to do in case you have a stroke and you need to recover, long-term recovery. And the person as an illustration in this talk totally recovered, went from almost dying of a stroke and having half the body not working, totally not working, to living a normal life, remarrying, teaching in a university, and then eventually died, and they did an autopsy, and nothing had changed anatomically, physically, about his brain from the day he had a stroke. What happened is it remapped the functions that were supposed to be done by the dead part of the brain to parts of the brain that were still alive through neuroplasticity. Anyway, go back and watch that talk. So let's talk about, how do I fight blood clots? How do I thin my blood using alternative methods other than pills? What can I do in case I have taken the COVID vaccine and I know my blood's thick? Here are the things to do. Number one, pineapple, fresh raw pineapple. It is fibrinolytic. It reduces clots. And the little numbers after the line there are the studies that I got in my paper on this. But anyway, grapefruit improves the fluidity of the blood, reducing the risk of clotting. Turmeric, garlic, and sesame thin the blood. Turmeric is very anti-inflammatory. Garlic's high in sulfur and so forth, boosts the immune system. Sesame seeds also are high in nutrients. They're very helpful for thinning the blood. A herb, you can make a herbal tea. There's a number of ones that are helpful. One is Chervil. One is King of Bitters. They help thin the blood. Good hydration assures thin blood. So men need to drink almost a gallon a day. Women, 3/4 of a gallon a day. This would be very helpful. Avoid fried foods, fatty foods. We already talked about fat foods, but I'm just putting them here in the context of thickening or thinning your blood, because these oily things thicken your blood and they increase obesity, and they make it so your blood's not going to thin out like it should. The higher percentage of your diet is fresh fruits and vegetables, the better for avoiding clots. Avoid refined foods which lack fiber. See here? This is like the white bread, white flour, white rice, white pasta, white tortillas, and sugar. And so you want to eat brown bread and avoid anything with refined sugar. How about agave? Is that any good? No, that's high in fructose. What you want is things like honey, dates, or just learn to enjoy things less sweet. That would be better. And you want to avoid inflammatory foods, such as fermented foods. I thought fermented foods were good. Not if you want to thin your blood. Vinegar, soy sauce, cheese, wine, etc. They increase the likelihood of clotting. So in summary, you want to choose nutrient-dense plant foods. Foods that are high in things that help your blood be nourished. We did a talk here on good blood. That's kind of targeting that as well. Drink lots of water, exercise regularly, manage your salt intake, avoid meat, oils, fats, MSG, alcohol, tobacco, sugar, fermented foods. Manage stress, and have a few natural remedies on hand in case somebody starts stroking. What was it again? 5 milligrams of, we should go back to that in case somebody didn't remember that, right? What are the things we want? 4 milligrams of potassium, 40 milligrams of zinc, 400 milligrams of magnesium, 1 glass of water every 10 minutes the first hour. That'd be 6 glasses of water in an hour. Hot foot bath with mustard and cayenne. And, sorry. All right. There you go. Okay, back to summary, back to our website. You can go to our website. If you look up on here under online videos, you'll see we've reorganized the website to put all the video resources on one page instead of on 3 pages, so that you can just click on one link and go there. And there's also presentation handouts, and we've put together the newsletters and presentation handouts on the one page as well. Okay, and that's northernlightshealtheducation.com. Right, I'm going to stop the screen share here, and also to shut down the PowerPoint and come back to Zoom.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Clark. I don't have any questions that came in, but I was looking at some of the comments people generally have with regard to treating stroke alternatively. And I've had this discussion with a few of my friends as well at work. And they were talking about the use of acupuncture as effective alternative treatments to treat people with hemiplegia. Between acupuncture and yoga and Reiki and all sorts of things of that nature, Dr. Clark, would you talk about recovery from a spiritualistic point of view in that regard there?
Yes, good question. You know, Satan can make us sick, and then he can make us well, and his techniques can follow all kinds of different practitioners. And don't think that these people don't get results, even though they have, you know, some kind of evil spirit actually involved in the treatment and in the recovery. And so what can the devil do? He can make you sick. He can give you a stroke, especially if he knows he can drive you to some kind of alternative practitioner that will actually invest you with some kind of evil spirit maybe the rest of your life. Sometimes when people are healed by the devil, they're under his control for the rest of their life with a power that it seems impossible to shake. So with your acupuncture, this follows the meridians of Eastern religion, the chakras of spinal energy, and the theory is that there's this wonderful power coming down through the universe, and it comes down your spine and comes out your seven channels of spinal energy or chakras or meridians. And the stroke was a result of one of those getting plugged up, and the way to unplug it is to stick a needle in there, and you have to have this special twist or spin on the end of the needle. And I remember when I was in residency, I was on hand surgery rotation. We're doing surgery on people's hands, people who hurt their hands or had degenerative diseases of the hands. And one of the teachers was this really a new ager, really out there new ager guy. And he was talking about, well, you know, he's a plastic surgeon that does hand surgery. But yet, when he had a problem with his thumb, he went to an acupuncturist. And when he went to the acupuncturist, he made the comment that he could tell by moving his thumb around that the acupuncturist has actually stuck the needle in what's called the flexor pollicis longus, one of the tendons that moves the thumb around. And so I guess I'm a bit outspoken at times, and I kind of said sarcastically, and we've all known that there was a special spot in the flexor pollicis longus that if we stuck a needle into it, it would fix everything. I don't think he appreciated my sarcasm, but anyway. It didn't make any sense at all where they stuck the needle. Why didn't it make any sense? There's nothing anatomical about where that needle went that would fix anything. But if it fixed something, it's through the power of something that doesn't care whether it's anatomical or not, whether it's physiological or not, whether it makes any sense or not. It just gets fixed through, well, evil spirits. And so, yeah. So no, we don't want to cure a stroke with any help from Satan or his practitioners or their way of treating things. We want to go to God. And in the end, if God doesn't get the honor, glory, and praise, then who did heal you? Who was involved? And a lot of times we go all over the earth looking for some exotic cure. You know, I'm going to go to South America and get the Golgi, or what is it, acai berries, and they're going to be my cure, and it'll cost me $50 a bottle for the juice, and but God hid it down there from me because I had to go all the way down there to get it. No, God doesn't hide the cure for your disease in some far off country and really high price. Those all violate His principles. And the most important thing we can do is pray and ask the Lord for a natural remedy that works for us. It's good to have a few things on hand that, I've given you a few suggestions, and just use the natural remedies, because natural means used in accordance with God's will bring about supernatural results. We pray for a miracle, and the Lord directs the mind to some simple remedy. That's 2SM 346. And so we look to God, we ask Him what to do, and He's not going to send us to some practitioner whose basis of practice comes out of idolatry or false religions, New Age, or anything like that.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Clark. I think considering that our presentations here have been clear cut, I would recommend, as you did, for folks to be able to watch our previous presentations with regard to controlling various neuroplastic conditions, as well as hypertension, and how to be able to control it naturally. But thank you again, Dr. Clark. I'm going to open it up for anyone who has a question. I know there were some who mentioned to me personally if they could ask a question at the end of the session. So if anyone has a question that you would like to be able to ask Dr. Clark, now would be your time, if you have one. I didn't see anything coming.
Uh, uh,
Go ahead, sister.
Hi, Dr. Clark. Happy Sabbath and good afternoon. I have a question. Since you talked about the systolic to go down, like how do I get my diastolic to go down? Like what would be like the steps? Would it be like the same thing as well? Like drinking, like pretty much getting hydrated and less salt, less sugar.
Yes, very good. Thanks for asking. And so just for those who don't know, the diastolic is the lower number in your blood pressure. And some people, the diastolic and the systolic, the higher number, get too close together. It's a narrow pulse pressure. It's often the result of the blood vessels being affected by the lifestyle. But anything that lowers the top number usually lowers the lower number as well. And the most important thing is to have very supple blood vessels that are responding to every beat of the heart, so that they kind of wave the blood flow on. This would mean you wouldn't have any plaque in your arteries, you wouldn't have any plaque in your heart, you wouldn't have any stiffness. Things that help this are exercise. People who exercise help to keep their blood vessels supple and moving. Avoiding, yes, the things like salt. Salt hardens arteries. The other thing that hardens arteries is a high cholesterol, so anything that lowers cholesterol. So if you go back and review our talks on cholesterol and on hypertension, those will give you all the details about lowering blood pressure, total blood pressure, and as well as helping the blood vessels. And so you can find those on my website or on this Zoom channel.
Thank you, doctor.
Yes, you're welcome. Thanks for asking questions.
There was a sister who we were praying for at the church yesterday. She mentioned about how she had what seemed to be an unusual case of tachycardia, where her heart rate would increase and she could actually feel the palpitation through her shirt, and she could literally see the pulsations as well. And uh, she said it was brought about by stress, I think, but the doctors have all these different processes and procedures to be able to help her with her tachycardia condition. Would there be something that can be done? They were thinking that it could be genetically, uh, transmitted in the family, because apparently her brother has the same condition. But would there be something that we can do to be able uh, to help her with her condition, considering that she doesn't have any associated symptoms?
Yes, very good. Thanks for asking. And when your heart goes racing like that, that's a risk for a for stroke. And I think we mentioned that under heart arrhythmias. And so the fast heart can be caused by an irritation of the heart muscle, usually through ions being imbalanced. Ions can be imbalanced by eating foods that are either too high in sodium or too low in magnesium. They can also be changed in their flow by electromagnetic fields. I had one lady, she had atrial fibrillation anytime she turned on her or used her tablet very much. And this isn't impossible and uncommon. I've had people who were totally healthy and then they bought a fancy, iPhone, started carrying it on their shirt pocket, and pretty soon they had some kind of tachycardia or arrhythmia. And so these electromagnetic fields can do this to you. Things we do to help that, of course, other than avoiding these electronic devices or foods that have a big imbalance in ions or molecules through high salt or high MSG. MSG will do this to you. Is to have people eat more fresh fruits and vegetables. If their heart is racing, we put an ice bag over their heart. We put the ice bag over the heart to slow the heart down. This is very effective because when it gets cool, all the metabolic processes slow down. That's one thing used. Another thing to do is especially take magnesium or eat foods high in magnesium. Magnesium foods that are high in magnesium are more like your nuts and seeds, but and your bran or things like that. But as in, you can buy bran, wheat bran, rice bran, those kind of brands. But you can buy pills that are high in magnesium. I mean magnesium pills. You can just take Epsom salts if you want. It doesn't have as a high absorption rate as probably their fancy pills, but it's pretty cheap. And what you don't use will help keep your bells going. Otherwise, getting more exercise, your heart's in good condition, doing some kind of job that's especially meaningful to you that you can do with all your heart helps arrhythmias. It's sort of the mind over body mechanism. Getting involved in some kind of exercise that gets the heart pumping, like swimming, biking, running, anything that puts the heart at a higher rate. And we're not talking sprinting for 5 miles. You don't want to get your heart too far out of range. They have a formula to tell you how fast it should go. It's basically your age, or a certain number minus your age, that they use to figure out your heart rate. This can be looked up on the internet. But yeah, the palpitations, definitely stress increases them. But being low on magnesium actually makes you more apt to respond physiologically in a negative way to stress. So there's a lot of interplay between actually whether you're stressed or not, and whether or not you have sufficient of these minerals on board to affect whether you both have stress or whether or not the stress goes into an arrhythmia. So magnesium is an important element. Zinc and even the things we mentioned here. I don't know about potassium, but definitely zinc. Well, potassium will help lower. If you're low in potassium, you certainly want to get some. And being low in it can affect a number of physiological processes, but it usually give you high blood pressure.
Thank you, Dr. Clark. I don't see any other questions, and there's no other response, but I'd like to be able to thank you for your presentation today. As usual, is pretty thorough. And those of you who have any questions, you can always reach out to Dr. Clark at his website, and I think it's rev14.com. You have also another site, Dr. Clark, now for that same. I think it can be reached at rev14.com as well.
Yeah, it's the same website. It's just got different pointers going to it.
Gotcha. Right. Our next presentation will be on September the 6th, where Dr. Clark will be dealing with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Some of us have had those diagnoses made, and we'd like to be able to know what we have or have not, and how you could be able to understand this sort of a treatment approach, maybe to be able to deal with this condition. But until we have an opportunity to meet again, may the Lord bless you, Dr. Clark, in your ministry. And let's go ahead and close with a word of prayer. Our gracious Father in heaven, you said in your word that you wish above all things that we would prosper and be in health. I ask you now that in the words that we have heard, in the truths that we can be able to apply, that we would be able to allow these truths to be able to take control of our lives, and the changes, that simple changes and remedies that we can be able to do to help ourselves and help our neighbors and our friends would be an opportunity for us to not only stay out of diseases, but we can be able to help someone else rid their problem and point them to the lovely Savior. Once again, thanking you now for hearing our prayers, being with Dr. Clark, his ministry, and his family. I pray that you would continue to be able to use us here in these last moments of this world's history to be able to stand as your witnesses. Thank you once again for hearing our prayers and answering even before we have asked. In Jesus' most sweetest name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Thank you again for being here. God bless you and keep you. And those of you who are still in the hours of the Sabbath, God bless the rest of your hours here in the Lord. Thank you, Dr. Clark.